To launch John's collection Gleanings, we're very honoured to have Pat McMahon from Galway County Library. Pat McMahon.
He hopes that our city shelters the washed-up immigrants or wounded hawks, that the city is a shrine for those who believe it to be holy or whole in the best sense, where on some days even miracles happen. He likes to think that the knots are as tight as moored boats in a storm on the Corridor Falls. And I want to make another connection which will demonstrate another aspect of why this gathering, or gathering here tonight, is important and significant. The great poet from Chile, Pablo Neruda, said that poetry is like bread. He wrote, "Poetry is like bread. It should be shared by all, by scholars and the man on the street corner, by all our vast, incredible, extraordinary family of humanity." Neruda grabbed poetry from the shelves of the rich and the royal, and he gave it back like bread to the people in a communal voice, rooted in man's raw passion and struggle for justice and for nourishment. This struggle for justice, this striving for justice, justice by poets, is strongly in evidence in the poem Amnesia in this book. John picks up in the opening lines of this poem a voice that we might hear sometimes, or we frequently hear on Liveline or read in some of those Sunday newspapers. "Round up the accordion players of Europe," the voice ordains. "Send them packing," the voice clamours, "the cheap labourers and all those non-nationals. Send them packing, bomb them by the boatful before landing," where John refers to many people from West Africa who tried to make it to the Spanish mainland by boat, and many of them must perish. "These people rob us of our jobs and our women," the voice goes on. But what about that voice, John Liddy asks? The voice we know on Liveline. Should that voice ever find itself in a foreign street in Manchester or Boston, who will soothe the voice should it croak to slake its thirst on foreign streets, begging for a pittance without a squeak to keep it company? For this righteous voice, John Liddy reminds us, is loud with pious platitudes and short by historical memory. All of that struggle for justice, is to be found in the wonderful poem entitled Amnesia on page 16 of Gleanings. There was a Spanish writer, Elvira Lindo, who was born in Cadiz, the same city where John's wife Pilar was born. Elvira Lindo interviewed Frank McCourt before he died. Reflecting on McCourt's life story, Elvira Lindo said that she often thinks about children who are growing up without knowing the meaning of education. She said we should never forget the idea that education and humour can rescue us from degradation, can rescue us from a disaster that sometimes seems inevitable. None of us have grown up without some experience of vulnerability, expecting at any moment for some disaster to befall us. McCourt was a great teacher because I am sure of his youthful experiences. Elvira Lindo tells us that a McCourt may appear in your life in the form of a school teacher or a librarian, and John Liddy is both a school teacher and a librarian, or in the form of a father or a mother or an older brother, someone who could teach you to protect yourself from the cruelty of others and not to exercise it on others. Some loving education is needed, she says, for some groups of young people whom the education system has abandoned to their fate. A self-indulgent education system that dooms poor children to be not just poor, but brutal too. How many McCourts does our educational system need, she asks. One would hope that we will have an education system which puts books and poems into the hands of young people in a meaningful way, so that they can, as John Liddy observes about his wife's mother, Milagros, who lives in Cadiz. John makes this observation about his wife's mother: so that people can work out their destiny in the privacy of their minds. What a privilege that would be for every child, to be able to work out their destiny in the privacy of their minds. How wonderful that would be. And there are many community organizations trying to do that kind of work in this city and in other places against greyhounds. The Limerick Writers Centre, in their own way, through the support of Revival Press, are making their contribution. Making the kind of contribution as John Liddy expresses it in the poem Sarada's Garden. To teach my students all the better, lessons clear as light on water. To just make one remark which is personal to myself, and then one final remark, and that will be it. One of the most influential persons in my life was a teacher I had in St. Patrick's National School, just on the Dublin Road. On a November day in 1961 or 62, he recommended a book of English essays and exercises to us. He just recommended it. I don't think he expected many of us to buy it. I remember going home that evening and asking my mother if she would give me the 4 shillings to buy the book. Money was tight, very tight in our house. She was at the kitchen table making an apple tart. Without a moment's hesitation, she found the 4 shillings for me. I remember getting on my bicycle and cycling in along the canal bank, cycling along the Mall over there, up Patrick Street and O'Connell Street to O'Mahony's, and I came home with that book. One of the poets on stage at Court in Galway last year was Jane Hirschfield, a New York City born writer. She was to tell us that a good poem shocks us awake one way or another through its beauty, its insight, its music. It shakes or seduces the reader out of the common gaze and into a genuine looking. And make no mistake, she says, I consider such a moment of transformation to be a radical event. There are several poems in this book which shock you awake through their beauty and their insight. Especially these lines from the poem Eyewitness. I was feeding straw to the cows when a man led a woman on a donkey into the stable and laid her down where it was soft and warm. After a while, I heard life's first cry and the music of the doves in the rafters. The whole place lit up like a palace, and people came from afar. Years later, I heard that the baby grew to be a great leader. I also heard that he was crucified. And I often thought of that night when he was born, the dove songs and the strange light that shone. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honoured to launch John Liddy's new book, Gleanings.